Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Curlin Community Connection. It's 5 o'clock on, I believe it's Thursday, although it could be any day of the week. It all seems the same these days. I am joined with a very special guest I'd like to introduce, Dr. David Boyles. He's an instructor of English over at Arizona State University. Go Sun Devils. He's also the voter registration and poll chair for the Arizona Democrats of Legislative District 18. In addition to that, he's also a research coordinator for White Hat Research and Policy Group. He's the co-founder of Drag Story Hour Arizona and is a past board member of NARAL Pro-Choice Arizona and the Abortion Fund of Arizona. He primarily works on issues related to education, voting rights, gender, and LGBTQ plus equality issues. How are you, doctor?
Doing great. How you doing?
I am swell. I am just wonderful. We're going to have a wide-ranging conversation. I'll ask you some questions. You just go off wherever you have to go. We'll ask that you try not to use too many four-letter words because we have a wholesome show here.
Okay, but I'll do my best.
Thank you. We're going live on Facebook through this Zoom. So if anybody out there has a question for Dr. Boyles or myself, you just go ahead and type it into the comments. Try to put a little question mark at the very first part so Andy Gomez can pick it out, plop it into the Zoom chat, and we can talk about it and get you your answers. So without much further ado, are you ready to roll, Doctor?
Let's do it.
All right. Hey, so it's Pride Month, right?
Yep.
June. And you got something going on. We're in a pandemic. COVID is upon us. Tell me, you're involved in Pride Month. What's going on?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I was one of the co-founders of Drag Story Hour Arizona. We started that back in 2019. And then actually a few months ago, right after, so the pandemic hit and we're in quarantine, actually Phoenix Pride, of course, was one of the first Pride events actually to get canceled because we do ours in April because we don't want to have a parade in June around here. And yeah, a group of us, folks in the LGBT community got together and formed what we've started calling Virtual Arizona Pride. And that first weekend of April, we did a weekend of programming to replace Phoenix Pride, fill that gap in, working with lots of organizations, Phoenix and Tucson Pride, GLSEN, AZ Typo, lots of other organizations that I'm forgetting right now. And so Virtual Arizona Pride has really taken off since then, and we've been doing other programming, and now we're doing events coming up for this weekend because we've got Juneteenth happening tomorrow, of course, and then we've got a weekend of Pride events. Flagstaff and Bisbee, this would have been their weekend for their in-person events. They both moved online, and Virtual Arizona Pride has been coordinating with them. So tomorrow night, we've got a Juneteenth Drag Story Hour at 5 p.m., and then a Juneteenth celebration that Virtual Arizona Pride and Next Gen Arizona are doing with a bunch of drag performers from around the state, also talking about voter registration and things like that, voting by mail. And then we've got Saturday, a 5-hour, 6-hour live event happening from Flagstaff with all kinds of performers from there. And then an event on Sunday with Bisbee Pride as well, all happening on Facebook Live. So we're doing Pride, virtually this year, doing it online, but still creating space for people to come together and celebrate Pride Month.
So how can people get information on that? Is there a website that we can throw into the feed?
Yeah, there's Virtual Arizona or virtualazpride.org. And then there's Virtual Arizona Pride on Facebook, Instagram, and Pride Arizona on Twitter. Follow any of those places and you get all the information. And then Drag Story Hour Arizona on Facebook is the best place to go.
Okay. And just as a warning, because I see us kind of spritzing out a little bit, I do get some internet troubles. So if I do, you just go ahead and start without me. Have a nice conversation with yourself, song and dance, whatever you need to do. You just keep the faith.
I can talk all night if you don't cut me off. So I'm fine.
Yeah, that's perfect. So I went to some events last year, and just remembering there was a bunch of booths, stages, things going on. What kind of things are going to be happening? Give me one event that I should tune into virtually.
All right. Well, so tomorrow night's Juneteenth event, just for example, we've got about a dozen performers, and I pulled up my list here, just who some of them are. So we've got folks like Sassy C. Diaz, Coco Bardot, Teddy Michael, a lot of drag performers from around Arizona. They have all filmed performances that will, be a part of the show. So it'll be like if you go to a drag show at, Charlie's or any place like that. They'll be performing. We will have virtual tip options for you to tip them via Venmo and things like that. And so it'll be very much like a drag show. And it's going to be hosted by Felicia Minor and Shannon McKenzie, who's Miss Arizona Gay Rodeo, and Christopher Ray, who's Mr. Arizona Gay Rodeo. So that's one event, is just drag performances done virtually. And this is something that people have been doing since the pandemic happened. Performers obviously were hurt really badly, by the pandemic. We're all had, gigs get canceled. So lots of performers have been doing these virtual events just kind of from their house, in their backyard, things like that. For this weekend, some of the other things we have coming up is on Saturday, I know as part of Flagstaff, there's going to be a live episode of Let's Have a Fifi with Felicia Minor and Freddie Prinze Charming. It's an internet talk show, very much like this, that they've been doing for 6 or 7 years now. And so, yeah.
Old hat.
Yeah. So they're experts at it. So they're doing that. They're going to have DJs, playing music, have, dance party in your living room, all those kind of things. When we've done virtual Arizona Pride events before, we've also done educational sessions through Zoom, like this, with groups like Glisten. They've done, their trainings that they do for creating safe spaces and things like that. We've done just live sort of chat Q&A kind of events. So, a lot of different things. It's not, the same thing as, as the in-person events, but it's a chance to, see, performers just like you would at Pride, interact with the organizations, learn more about the different organizations, all the stuff that, in the same spirit that you would get at Pride.
Nice. So basically, you had mentioned that you started the Drag Story Hour of Arizona?
As one of the founders, yeah.
One of the founders, okay. Did all of you really have is this a major problem that you had with 60 Minutes, that their story hour wasn't good enough?
Yeah, well, there's just, not enough drag queens in it.
Ah, okay. Well, I sometimes, full confession, I sometimes watch 60 Minutes,
mm-hmm.
and I don't even notice.
But wouldn't it be better?
It absolutely would be better.
Like throw on a wig. I don't even know, is Mike Wallace still alive? I haven't watched that show in a long time. So
no, but his son, Chris Wallace, is.
Okay.
Yeah. That's funny. Hey, we're talking to Dr. David Boyles here, master of many things, not a jack of all trades. He really knows his stuff about a lot of different things. So if you have a question for the good doctor, please type it into the chat and we'll get it answered. Hey, let's go on to something serious here, okay? So it is Pride Month. The Supreme Court just came out with a monumental decision on Monday. Could you tell the viewers a little bit about what that means, those 3 different cases?
Yeah, it's been really interesting with this case, because you're right. On the one hand, it is very monumental, but it's also strange, because I think especially when you talk to people, especially folks who are not, in the LGBT community and don't follow these things closely, a lot of people are shocked that this didn't already exist, that people could still be fired, for being LGBT.
Not only are they shocked, but you're going to shock them a little bit more by what can still happen. Because I think when people heard, the Supreme Court ruled for for people to have equal rights, now all of a sudden it's really not the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, there's a couple different things there. You're right. So, so just to take employment, which was the case here, there was a poll last year asking, should employers be able to fire people for being LGBT? And 92% of people said no, including like 80-something% of Republicans. It's not a controversial issue.
It's not.
So first of all, there's no national legislation specifically protecting LGBT rights. There's an act called the Equality Act that's been in Congress for years, gets introduced but never goes anywhere. Greg Stanton, who's my congressman, he co-sponsored the latest version of it that came up in this, the last session of Congress, but it's still, of course, it passed through the House, with Democratic control, died in the Senate, as everything else does with Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, that guy's the Grim Reaper, huh?
Yeah. So there's no national legislation. So it's this patchwork of state and civic ordinances that cover employment, housing, healthcare, all these kind of things. But on employment in 27 states, including Arizona, there was no statewide protection. And so the Supreme Court case was a big deal. And what the case did, it was around Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which included, ban discrimination on, of course, race, national origin, but also included sex in there. And weirdly, sex was only mentioned in Title VII, which was the employment section. So that's why this case was only about employment. So there were 3 cases that got consolidated, 2 involving, I think it was both gay men who were fired, and then 1 a trans woman. And the ruling basically was, the argument that was made by the plaintiffs was, you can't fire someone for being either gay or transgender without taking their sex into account. You can't fire a man, who's attracted to men, and not fire a woman who's attracted to men, without taking their sex into account. You can't hire someone, as was the case with Amy Stevens, who was the plaintiff in the transgender rights case. You can't hire someone when they're presenting as male and then fire them when they're presenting as female without taking sex into account. And so that was the logic that they were able to convince Roberts and Gorsuch, the 2 conservative justices, on. And so that's why they got the case. That's why it came out, in our favor there. So that covers employment, which is great. But there's still no protections around healthcare. A lot of you probably have heard of last week, the Trump administration changed this rule in the Affordable Care Act. And it's actually very similar reasoning. Under Obama, the Affordable Care Act, it says it has a sex discrimination clause, and Obama had interpreted it, the Obama administration had interpreted it to include LGBT people. Trump said no. So that's going to get challenged now, kind of on the same logic. And I think there's a good chance that gets struck down too, just, on the same reasoning.
Precedent now.
Yeah, exactly. So, but, as it stands right now, no protections there. Again, in Arizona, we are, HRC, Human Rights Campaign, does equality index grades of different states, kind of ranking where they're at in terms of their LGBT legislation. Arizona's, you might not be surprised to learn, is not good. We are, get a very low score.
Yeah. So David, here's where I want you to kind of cut to the quick. I am going to be a state representative. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And I believe that there should be equality for all. What do I need to pass as far as legislation to assure that to happen, at least in our little hamlet?
Yeah. I mean, ideally, you could do a statewide version of the Equality Act, the one that's sitting in Congress right now, which would simply ban discrimination in housing, employment, healthcare, and I think some other areas that I'm forgetting, but ban discrimination specifically enumerated for LGBT people on the basis of sexual orientation, basis of gender identity. If that was passed at the state level, and there's a lot of states, it's about half the states have some version of that right now, and half don't. Pass that solves all these problems. There's no more court cases about it. It's in black and white, in the law.
Okay, so I consider this show a safe space.
Mm-hmm.
I don't usually ask my guests to go into the opinions of what the other side is, but I think we're safe here. Yeah. I'm just trying to understand why would, I could get Kathy Herod and I can put her over here, but why do people feel that there should be this need to not have a law, that there should be able to discriminate? What is their basis for that?
The biggest argument you hear is around religious freedom. And this is where actually, if you want to be a cynic and a doomsayer, as I usually am, on the case that came down this week.
Let your freak flag fly. Let's go.
The one little area that's could come back and be a problem later on was they didn't deal with the issue of religious discrimination or religious freedom. So the conservatives might later carve out a big exception in this employment discrimination case, saying basically if it's your religious belief that you cannot, that you don't agree with homosexuality or don't agree with, people being trans, then you can fire them. And that's the biggest argument that you hear against it is like it would be an infringement on the religious beliefs of business owners of corporations, which now have religious beliefs after the Hobby Lobby decision from a few years ago, where the conservative says businesses are allowed to have religious viewpoints. So that's the one here. But like I said, like it's a minority position. It's the Kathy Herods are able to control their people on the Republican side and not allow this stuff to ever come up for a vote. You look at it polls really well, even with Republicans. Like even majority of Republicans, when you ask them, they're like, yeah, people shouldn't be fired for being gay, shouldn't be kicked out of housing for being gay, shouldn't be denied health care. So it's a really fringe minority position, but unfortunately, that fringe minority holds a lot of power.
I mean, you got part of the Republican base that is more libertarian, right? I mean, the fact that, I mean, let's just look at it this way. I mean, if we throw some masks on some people, maybe they would leave us alone, right? I mean, that's just, no one's asking you to put on a mask here. Oh my goodness, it's just beyond me. Hey, you want to get into a couple more topics? If you have a question, throw it into the chat. If you have a nice comment about David, his hair or something, just throw it in the chat. If it's really nice, we'll share it. So I'm a teacher. I retired to focus on this run for representative. And one of the most powerful moments in my career was just recently with the Red for Ed movement, where 75,000 people stood up, went downtown, 100-degree heat, and just said, our kids deserve better. And there was a group of parents that kind of formed themselves, not red, but purple, and purple for parents. And they have now morphed into where you actually did an article, a blog post on Blog for Arizona, which is a Tucson kind of thing, but it goes statewide, where there was a governing board meeting in Chandler, where some comprehensive sex education was up for debate.
Actually, it wasn't even.
Oh, it wasn't there? All right, take me back. You go.
Okay, yeah, it gets a little complicated because when you deal with these folks, you end up in the world of like right-wing conspiracy theory, and it gets very messy. And I know way more about these right-wing conspiracy theories than I ever really wish I did. But yeah, so Purple for Parents was formed. They claim, they were this group of parents who were frustrated with these lazy teachers who walked off the job, and formed an opposition to that to represent the rights of the parents. In actuality, Purple for Parents is an offshoot of the Arizona Patriot Movement Arizona, which is recognized as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. They're this group that has been around basically since the 2016 election. We're very emboldened by that election.
Can I say something, David? They were actually at the Red for Ed rally. They were, they had their little machine guns out, and they were kind of right over there by the rose bushes. I thought they really liked us a lot, and they were just there to protect us. But lo and behold, that's not the case.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's where it started. And then basically a group of them got some purple shirts, and that became Purple for Parents. And that was kind of where it started.
Wearing purple shirts.
Yeah. Gotta be careful. It's like gang colors now. All these different factions. But yeah, so they formed out of that. I mean, they're white nationalists. They're, very much were emboldened by Trump in the election. They showed up at the March for Our Lives event in Phoenix in 2018 and threatened a bunch of high schoolers with their AR-15s. I'm involved, as you mentioned, a lot of pro-choice activism, involved with the Handmaids Resistance Phoenix, who does a lot of protesting. They've shown up and threatened us and put their guns in our faces before. So I'm very familiar with these folks. And so they formed Purple for Parents. And they basically started in 2019, this real campaign at the school boards and attacking the school boards. For Chandler in particular, there's kind of two kind of things that kind of set them off. One was Chandler had adopted this program of basically it was a teacher training program around equity.
Right.
Teaching teachers, about
ahead of their time, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something not very controversial, but they, of course, the Purple for Parents was arguing it was racist against white people, and all this kind of stuff. So there was that. And then the other thing that really set them off, honestly, was in the 2018 election. Lindsay Love got elected to the Chandler Unified School Board. Lindsay is African-American woman, very outspoken in favor of this equity education, outspoken in favor of comprehensive sex education, of repealing the no promo homo law, which we did last year. And they really set their sights on her for all those reasons. There's a reason they targeted her. And they came after her, harassing her online, harassing her at the meetings. And the Chandler meeting, the one in January that I wrote about, was basically, after several meetings of them doing this, of them showing up, harassing her at the meeting, hijacking the meeting to talk about these conspiracy theories, about how Planned Parenthood is going to be teaching anal sex to fourth graders if they adopt new sex education requirements and all this ridiculous nonsense. There was a group of us that kind of stood up in response to them at that January meeting, packed the meeting, and then one of the folks on the board who is allied with them tried to, because there were too many people there, decided there would be no comments that night. And so we had to disrupt the meeting for them to even allow us to have comments. And so, yeah, that was what caused it. Yeah.
But this was also after they had an opportunity at a prior board meeting making some real ugly comments.
Yeah, they had done it at several board meetings, making ugly, harassing comments. But then they tried to shut us down when we came to support Lindsay, support the equity program, support sex education, even though the school board never at any point was even debating changing their sex ed requirements. That was just, again, a conspiracy theory that they got in their rotted brains. So that was kind of what happened there. From there, you also might have seen, I wrote recently, Scott Weinberg, one of their leaders,
yes,
then was going to run in the Kyrene district, which, if you're not familiar with the area, connects to Chandler. It's where I live, in kind of the west part of Chandler and Ahwatukee. He was going to run for the school board there until he got into some trouble because his Facebook feed, he was basically a Twitter troll, and that finally came back to bite him when he falsely accused an LGBT ASU student of being the perpetrator of the shooting in Glendale a few months ago. And he luckily is out of the race now, but there are still others who are running for boards. There's Forrest Moriarty, who's one of their leaders, who's running in with LD18, Apache Junction.
Kelly Townsend's district.
Yeah, he's running with Kelly on a ticket this year. Probably going to win because of where they are, unfortunately. Yeah. And so he's going to might be in the legislature next year. So yeah, we really got to watch out for these people in the legislature, at the school boards. They are organized. They are pushing this really crazy, really extremist agenda that is racist, that is anti-LGBT.
It's really very, very dangerous. Mm-hmm. And I just want to kind of point out a couple of things, okay? One, if Forrest Moriarty wins, that is more reason to elect people like myself, so he's in the minority. Mm-hmm. There are 60 seats. As long as people like him are the ones under the number of 30, he's basically neutralized. Mm-hmm. He can still spew hate, but nobody has to listen at that point. The other thing is about about sex education in Arizona. We're one of 3 states that actually requires parents to opt into the program. Mm-hmm. You have to sign up to be in there. So these people that, if they actually have, you talked about conspiracy theories, but if in their mind they seriously believe this stuff, they do not have to allow their children to go in there. They don't need to save the world and stop sex education going on, because that doesn't save the world. We are all well versed in the need for education. When it has education in that title, we need it. We don't have it here in Arizona. We need more of it. Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily want to go after, whether you should have to sign your kid up or not sign your kid up. It's one of the things that makes Arizona the Wild West, I guess. We're one of very few states. But that is a direct protection for people like the Purple for Parents. They could just kind of take their ball and go home now. I've got a couple of... Go ahead.
Just to add on there, their whole argument, in theory, is for parents' rights. We are a state that already protects the rights of parents, so much, in so many areas. We are one of the school, leaders in school choice, which is a whole different debate we don't have to get into tonight, but parents already have a lot of say over where their kid goes to school. And then, with sex ed in particular, and opt out, which gives the game away, actually, that's not actually what they care about, that they're, not worried about their kid, their precious little kid getting, their mind corrupted, by comprehensive sex ed. It's about using that as a pretext to spew their hateful rhetoric.
Yeah. I mean, if the words are correct, right? Comprehensive in education, that's pretty good. I've got a comment from Rachel. Says you're smart. You have great hair. She says, thank you for the conversation. Thank you,
right.
for the comment.
Thank you, Rachel.
Elise has a question for you, and I think this is probably directed somewhere I can actually use it. As a highly engaged local organizer, you work with a lot of electeds. What would be your biggest advice to them / me? I added the / me on there.
Okay. Oh, that's a good question.
And you hurry up and get through this because I want to get to Eddie Farnsworth as protecting rapists.
Okay. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. It's been
a teaser. That's what we call a teaser in the biz.
Yeah. I mean, well, so first of all, I think so much of that depends, as you just mentioned, on what happens in November, and what the makeup's going to look like in January. Because it's a very different ball game if we get those 2 seats flipped, minimum 2 seats flipped, and the Democrats are in the majority, because then it's really a matter of there's a lot that I would say it switches from playing defense to playing offense at that point, right? I think there's a lot we could do to push things in a progressive direction. Whereas right now, when Kelly Townsend is chairing committees and stuff, so much of it just protecting against the bad stuff. But I would say
she actually called. All right, I'm sorry to interrupt. She actually called the Capitol Police to clear the room when somebody, I believe it was
Randy,
Randy Paris.
Of mine. I know this guy. Yeah, she called the cops on him because he was trying to speak at a meeting.
Yeah, he wanted his time.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say, I mean, if we just take education in particular, I would say, actually, first of all, for education, not so much for the electeds, but I would say, for voters, check out your school board races. Who's running for school board, really talk to them, get to know them, vote for good people on there, because they have so much control over what actually happens in the schools. Even with sex ed, Arizona does not require that school districts teach sex ed. And there's a fair amount of leeway in what it looks like. So there's a lot that, districts can do in either direction. But then, for the electeds, I would say, on education, first and foremost, this doesn't exactly apply to you, but for the folks who are not educators, talk to the educators, bring them into the room. And that's why we need to elect educators, have folks like you, and we have folks already, like Jennifer Pollack, who are educators. Really let them lead on those issues because they are, the experts in that. I think that'd be the biggest thing. As I said earlier, I think we, in the state, in my opinion, have given too much deference to folks who are not educators in controlling things.
Yeah.
And it's time to give some more of that power back to the actual educators.
I thank you for that comment. Jill Lassen, St. Germain, loving the conversation, mutual friend of ours. She asked for people to support the Drag Story Hour, Arizona again. Wonderful inclusive literacy organization that needs so much support as possible. And she's a librarian, right? So
yeah, she's great. Yeah, she volunteered to the Drag Story Hour. Great.
I did the teaser. I really want to get to it. I mean, I find this amazing. Tell me the story behind Eddie Farnsworth protecting these child rapists.
Okay, well, so there's him protecting the child rapists, and then what he did this year, which is protecting a different group of rapists.
Okay, I'm sorry. He's just all for rapists.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so Eddie Farnsworth from LD18, fellow educator, charter school operator and millionaire, put quotation marks around educator there. So last term, you might remember there was a push to extend the statute of limitations for folks who were victims of childhood sexual abuse. This came on the heels of the whole situation with, I just blanked on his name, the one that got kicked out last year for.
Yes, David Stringer. Let's just.
Yeah.
So Stringer had a checkered past, and he's running again. So, oh my goodness, he's running for actually a county attorney position. He started this whole thing, but what's interesting is that the bill would basically allow more years because there is damage to children and other people that they just can't kind of come to grips with it until after therapy and stuff. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So this is a bill. Paul Boyer, who's a Republican, took up this bill. Heather Carter was, I think, with the other co-sponsor on it, 2 Republicans, that would extend the statute of limitations. We have one of the shortest statutes of limitations in the country for this. Yep. And would allow, and particularly to sue institutions for negligence, for basically allowing the abuse to happen. And this is something we've seen a lot in the last few years with, the U.S. Olympic team, Michigan State, places like that. And that apparently was the part that Eddie really was opposed to, was exposing institutions like, just for example, charter school operators who were negligent in, stopping abuse that might be liable for lawsuits. And so he, tried to kill this bill. This was largely the reason that the session stretched past Memorial Day last year. There was a showdown between him and Boyer and Carter over it, which they eventually did get through, but after he fought tooth and nail. Then this session came up. There was a bill, I believe Victoria Steele was the sponsor, that would basically allow victims of sexual assault to sever parental rights when there was a child produced by the rape, basically sever the rapist's parental rights. Seems very common sense, right? That they should be able to do that. And Eddie again threw a wrench into the proceedings because he wanted to add an exception in the case where the rapist was married to the rape victim. So he wanted to basically allow for married couples for the rape victim to not be able to sever, the rapist's parental rights. Basically, and this also, it came out from this that he'd also opposed some earlier marital rape legislation. Seems like he largely does not think that marital rape exists, that someone can be raped, in a marital relationship, which of course, unfortunately, there were those laws only came on the books, in the 80s and 90s. It was in the early 90s that we finally had laws on those, but he apparently is still opposing that, which of course is horrific and and just horrible. And so that's why, like I said, I'm affiliated with the Handmaid's Resistance, and we like to, we're a performance art protest troupe that like to cause trouble and make scenes that get attention, that bring media attention to these things that get overlooked otherwise. And so a group of people from our organization went into the gallery one day in their handmaids red capes and bonnets and held up a sign that said Eddie Farnsworth protects rapists, which got taken down very quickly, but not before we got some pictures of it, which you can still see online. Again, just trying to highlight this because this is the thing that he was trying. He basically was trying to kill this. In committee, was telling Victoria Steele to take this out, but didn't want obviously his name attached to it, and was trying to do it, secretly. So we tried to just let folks know what Eddie's really about when it comes to protecting rapists at the expense of sexual assault victims and protecting institutions like he did last year.
Yeah, and thank you very much for that, because the education is power, and we don't have enough of the. Newspapers are just not what they used to be. It's a tough environment for them to survive. So we need these citizen journalists pointing out what's happening in the darkness of night. So thank you very much for that.
Great. Yeah, it's a thing. Like we kind of figured that out. The handmaids visual with the capes and the bonnets. Journalists, photographers like that a lot. If that's at an event, it will get photographed. That photograph will show up as the lead photo on a story. We try to leverage that to bring attention to these things because there's a lot that slips through the crack, especially at the Capitol, just because we don't have the enough folks covering it. They don't have enough time and manpower to cover everything that they should be doing.
Well, it's really important to get a majority so that the first vote you take, which is to elect your leader of your party in that majority, and they then place people into committee chairs, and that's where everything happens, where bills can be passed or bills can be held. And
that thing, I mean, with Eddie in particular, so much of what he's done, the horrible stuff he's done, all comes from him being a chair, having that power to just not ever bring a bill up for a vote. And but those two seats, Democratic majority, totally changes.
And I'm going to give people my website, and then I'll ask them to put your website again. Curlin23.com. Get involved in the campaign however you can with either money or time. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen here. We can replace the self-described bigot of Jay Lawrence. David, what's your website again for the Pride?
virtualazpride.org.
Okay. You had mentioned school board candidates, how it's really important for people to vote local. I know there's a push within the Republican Party to buddy up with Purple for Parents and place these people on the school boards. Please keep your eyes out on them. We actually have one of our school board members that we're supporting on this show tomorrow night. Her name's Julie Sanowski. We're collecting signatures on Saturday for Julie, for Rose Smith, and for Zach Lindsay, along with giving away Curlin signs from 9 to 11 and other swag. You can do a visit with the pop-up. Check it out. And now, my friend, and I say that with great deference, we're going to play a game. Are you ready?
All right, I'm nervous.
I know. So I don't watch this show, but I did a little snooping on your Facebook. And I noticed that you're very excited about playing in parks and recreating.
Okay.
So there's a show that fits right up there for you, Parks and Recreation. So I went online. I don't know if these are good, but I've got a couple of questions to ask you about Parks and Recreation. Are you ready? Okay, no crying.
All right.
All right. What is Leslie's favorite thing to order from JJ's?
Waffles.
And?
Whipped cream.
Thank you, sir. You are a fan. Whew! Breathe easy, my friend. Breathe easy. Okay.
That was an easy one.
It was? I don't know. What is the name of Pawnee's rival city?
Eagleton.
Very good. 2 on the board. Here we
I haven't watched it in a while, so yeah.
My campaign manager, Andy Gomez, is a real geek on this, so she's playing along. Okay. All right. This is I found this question. I'm like, oh man, I got to ask this. I don't know if it's a good question, but it's very timely. Leslie has a long-standing crush on this man.
Oh, yeah. Become problematic now. Yeah, Joe Biden.
Joe Biden.
Yeah, crazy. I think I commented recently that storyline has not aged well, much like Joe Biden.
Okay, speaking of not aging well, who did Louis C.K. play on the show?
Oh, yeah. Not aging well for a lot of reasons, because he played a cop.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, I shouldn't laugh at that. David Sanderson was the man's name. Okay, this is my last question. I hope this is a good one. You are obviously Parks and Rec superstar. This will put you in the region of never having missed a question on this show. Okay. Ron Swanson moonlights as a jazz saxophonist whose stage name is?
Duke Silver.
Duke Silver. Very nice. For the gold.
All right. You know what I do with my time now.
Yeah, that's funny. I guess I got to watch that show. And I would like to say that Andy Gomez got them all correct as well.
Yeah.
Hey, we're going to be joining again tomorrow, 5 o'clock, with Julie Sanowski, running for the Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board. And then we'll have a whole group of shows next week. Check out David Boyles and his work with Virtual Pride. Check out us at curlin23.com. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Look forward to seeing you in the future, okay?
All right, thank you so much. This was fun.
Yeah, take care.
Yeah, thank you.